Rain tapped softly against the tall glass windows of Le Marais, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. Inside, warm lights glowed against polished wood and white tablecloths, hiding the cold night outside. At table 7, a woman in an elegant black coat studied the menu without emotion. Her name was Ava Sterling, a billionaire known for buying companies the way others ordered coffee. Across the room, Daniel Brooks, a single father and waiter with tired eyes, adjusted his apron. Tonight, he was just trying to make it through another shift. He had no idea that one small moment, one quiet note would change both their lives forever. Before we go any further, tell me, where are you watching from right now? A big city, a small town, maybe somewhere you feel unnoticed. Drop your city or country below. It's incredible how far one story can travel. Daniel approached table 7 with a calm smile. Good evening, he said gently. Can I start you with something to drink? Ava barely looked up. Water, no ice. Her voice was smooth, distant, used to being obeyed. Daniel nodded and returned moments later. As he placed the glass down, he noticed her hands. Perfect nails, expensive watch, but a slight tremble she didn't bother hiding. Are you ready to order? He asked. Yes, Ava said. The steak, medium rare, and a glass of red. Daniel paused for half a second, just long enough to meet her eyes. Of course. From the kitchen, Daniel watched her through the small window. She sat alone while other tables laughed. Couples leaned in close, families shared plates. Ava stared at her phone, then turned it face down, as if tired of the world demanding things from her. When the steak was ready, Daniel carried it carefully, the smell rich and comforting. He set the plate down perfectly. Enjoy, he said. As he turned to leave, Ava spoke. You've been watching me, she said, not accusing, just stating. Daniel stopped. I'm sorry if it felt that way. She studied him now. You don't look like the kind of man who belongs here. Daniel smiled politely. Neither do most people. Until they do. Something in his tone caught her off guard. Minutes later, Daniel returned to check on her. The steak was barely touched. Is everything okay? He asked. Ava hesitated. It's fine. I'm just not hungry. Daniel nodded, then did something unexpected. He slipped a small folded note onto the edge of her plate as if it were routine. For later, he said softly. Ava frowned. What's this? Just something I thought you might need, Daniel replied. No pressure. He walked away before she could respond. At the service station, his hands shook slightly. He thought of his daughter Lily, asleep at home, her school shoes worn thin, her smile still bright despite everything. He thought of the nights he skipped dinner so she wouldn't have to. And he wondered if he'd crossed a line. If you were there in that moment, would you have said something or stayed silent? Be honest, comment your answer below. And if words fail you, just hit like to show that compassion still matters. At table 7. Ava stared at the folded note for a long moment. Then slowly she opened it. Her breath caught. The restaurant noise faded. The clink of glasses, the quiet music, the murmur of money and comfort, all of it disappeared as her eyes moved across the few handwritten words. Ava Sterling, the woman who owned skyscrapers and controlled markets, felt something she hadn't felt in years. Seeing, her fingers tightened around the note as she whispered. Barely audible, how could he possibly know? And in that moment, a simple dinner turned into the beginning of a reckoning she never saw coming. Ava Sterling stared at the note like it had teeth. Her fingers tightened around the thin paper, knuckles paling, as if the words might vanish if she blinked too hard. Around her, the restaurant kept living forks against plates. Low laughter, soft jazz like nothing in the world could ever break, but Ava's world had already cracked. The note was simple. No signature, no flirtation, no request, just 4 lines in a waiter's handwriting, uneven, honest. You keep touching your left hand. Like you're looking for a ring that isn't there. I'm sorry. Eat 1 bite for him. You deserve to keep breathing. Ava's throat tightened so fast it felt like a hand had closed around it. Her left hand moved on an instinct thumb, rubbing the faint pale line where her wedding ring used to sit. She hadn't noticed she'd been doing it. Not consciously. No one ever noticed her. Not like this. She looked up sharply. Scanning the room. Daniel, her waiter, was at the service station, pretending to check receipts. His posture was neutral, professional, like he'd already moved on. But Ava saw it now, a tired man trying to hold himself together. The way people do when they've lived too long with invisible pain. Ava pushed her chair back and stood. People moved out of her way without realizing why. Wealth had a gravity to it. Even when it was quiet, she walked straight to the service station. Daniel looked up, and for the first time, his calm mask slipped. Not fear, not panic. Just the look of a man realizing the moment had arrived. Ava held up the note. Why did you write this? Daniel swallowed. Because you looked familiar. Ava's voice sharpened. You don't know me. I know grief, Daniel said softly. For a second, Ava's face tightened, offended, then it wavered. Because the word hit too close, she lowered her voice. Explain. Daniel glanced around, then nodded toward a small hallway by the kitchen. If you want, over there. It's quieter. Ava followed him, heels clicking against the floor like a countdown dot in the hallway. The warm restaurant noise faded. The air smelled like bread and soap. Daniel leaned against the wall, still holding himself carefully, like he wasn't allowed to take up space. Ava stared at him. How did you know about the ring? Daniel's eyes dropped to her hand. You kept rubbing that spot, he said. People do it when they've had something there a long time, and then suddenly it's gone. Ava's jaw tightened. That could mean anything. Daniel nodded. It could. But then you turned your phone face down like it was too loud. And you didn't touch your food. You weren't here for dinner. Ava's breath trembled, just once. Then why was I here? Daniel didn't answer quickly. He chose his words like they were fragile. Because it's the anniversary, he said quietly. Or close to it. Ava froze, her eyes widened, and the billionaire composure, the steel she wore like perfume, cracked. No, she whispered. No one knows that. Daniel looked at her with something that wasn't pity. It was recognition. I didn't know, he said. I guessed. Because I've stood in that place. Ava's voice was smaller now, almost angry at itself. And you think a note fixes that? Daniel shook his head. No, but silence makes it worse. And I saw you drowning at a table full of people. Ava stared at him like he'd done something impossible, like he'd spoken a truth no one dared speak to her. What's your name? She asked. Daniel, he said. Daniel Brooks. Ava held the note tighter. Why do you care? Daniel exhaled slowly. Because my wife died 2 years ago, he said. And I remember what it felt like when people avoided my eyes. Like grief was contagious. Ava's lips parted, but no words came. Daniel continued, voice low and steady. I used to work in finance. Not fancy. Just stable. Then she got sick, and the bills came, and everything changed. Now I'm a waiter, and I'm not ashamed of it. But sometimes, he swallowed, sometimes I look at my daughter and wonder if love is always this expensive. Ava's face softened despite her effort to keep it hard. Your daughter? She asked. Lily, Daniel said, and the way his voice warmed on her name revealed everything. She's 8. Ava's eyes flickered. You're a single father? Daniel nodded. She's my whole world. For the first time, Ava looked at him and didn't see a waiter. She saw a man who kept showing up even when life had stopped being fair. Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would, when you felt invisible and exhausted? Right, yes, and tell me their name. Sometimes gratitude needs a voice, even years later. Ava stared down at the note again, then back at Daniel. So you wrote that because you thought, I needed permission to feel. Daniel shook his head. Not permission, just a reminder that you're still human. Ava's chest rose and fell unevenly. Her voice dropped to a whisper. My husband died 4 years ago. Daniel didn't flinch. I'm sorry. Ava laughed once sharp, broken. Everyone says that. Then they ask about stock, or deals, or how fast I recovered. Daniel's eyes held hers. Did you? Ava's throat tightened. No. A long silence followed, the kind that tells the truth better than speech. Finally, Daniel straightened. I should get back, he said quietly. I didn't mean to wait, Ava said. Daniel paused. Ava's voice was careful now, like she didn't trust it. You said eat one bite for him? Daniel nodded. Ava swallowed. Come to my table. Daniel blinked. Ma'am, I can't, please, Ava said, and the word shocked even her. Just for 10 seconds? Daniel hesitated, then nodded once. They walked back into the glow of Lemuray, back into the world that bowed to Ava and ignored Daniel, but something had shifted. Ava sat down slowly, picked up her fork, and cut the smallest piece of steak. Her hands trembled. She lifted the bite, paused, eyes glistening, and then ate it. Ava Sterling didn't smile, but she breathed, and as Daniel stood there, quiet and steady, Ava looked up at him like she was seeing the first light after years of darkness. I want to know why you're really here, she said softly. Not in this restaurant, in this life. Daniel opened his mouth, and in that moment, neither of them noticed the man at the next table watching closely, his phone angled just enough to record. Daniel felt it before he saw it, the prickle at the back of his neck, the sense that something private had slipped into public space. He didn't turn around, but he knew. Someone nearby had been watching too closely. Ava noticed it too. Her eyes flicked past Daniel's shoulder, sharp and trained. Years of boardrooms and hostile takeovers had taught her how to read a room in seconds. Go back to work, she said quietly. Now, Daniel hesitated. Are you sure? Yes, Ava replied, already lifting her glass of water. I'll finish eating. Daniel nodded once and stepped away, his heart beating faster than it should have. As he returned to the service station, he caught a glimpse of a man 2 tables away, mid-40s, expensive watch, phone lowered a fraction too late. The man avoided his eyes. Daniel exhaled slowly. Please don't let this become something ugly, he thought. For Ava, the rest of the meal passed in fragments. She took 2 more bites, then a third. Not because she was hungry, but because Daniel's words had unlocked something stubborn inside her. The ache was still there, but it wasn't strangling her anymore. She paid the bill without looking at the number, left a generous tip, then paused. On the receipt, beneath the total, she wrote a single line, "Thank you for seeing me." She folded it carefully and slipped it beneath the edge of the plate, mirroring the way Daniel had given her the note. When Ava stood to leave, Daniel was helping another table. She didn't interrupt. She walked out into the rain alone, coat pulled tight, the city reflecting off wet pavement like 1,000 broken mirrors. At home that night, Daniel unlocked the door quietly. The apartment was small, warm, and smelled faintly of laundry detergent and tomato soup. Lily lay asleep on the couch, a blanket half fallen to the floor, a crayon still clutched in her hand. Daniel smiled and lifted her gently, careful not to wake her. As he tucked her into bed, she murmured, "Did you have a good night, Daddy?" He brushed her hair back. "Yeah," he whispered. "I did." Later, alone at the kitchen table, Daniel unfolded the receipt Ava had left behind. He read her message twice, then the third time, letting the word settle. Thank you for seeing me. He didn't know why it mattered so much, but it did. The next morning, the restaurant manager called him into the office. Daniel's stomach dropped. The manager, Paul, sat stiffly behind the desk, phone face down beside him. "Daniel," he said, not unkindly, "did anything unusual happen last night?" Daniel chose his words carefully. "I spoke briefly with a guest who seemed upset." Paul sighed. "There's a video." Daniel's chest tightened. "Of what?" Paul turned the phone around. The clip was short, grainy, angled. It showed Daniel leaning in slightly at Ava's table. No sound, no context. Just enough to suggest impropriety. "They're asking questions," Paul continued. "About boundaries?" Daniel swallowed. "I didn't cross any." Paul studied him. "I believe you, but corporate doesn't like uncertainty." Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand. Until they decide," Paul said. "I need you off the floor, unpaid." The word hit hard. Daniel walked home under a gray sky, his steps heavy. Rent, groceries, Lily's school trip. Everything stacked up in his mind like unpaid bills. At a crosswalk, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Daniel Brooks?" A woman's voice asked. "Yes, this is Ava Sterling." Daniel stopped walking. "I hope this isn't inappropriate," Ava continued, her voice steady. "But I wanted you to hear it from me. Someone recorded us. I've already spoken to the restaurant." Daniel closed his eyes. "I'm sorry. I never meant to stop," Ava said gently. "You did nothing wrong. And I won't let someone turn kindness into a problem." Daniel exhaled shakily. "Thank you." There was a brief pause. Then Ava added, "May I ask you something personal?" He hesitated. "Okay, why did you stay?" she asked. "Last night. With me. You could have walked away." Daniel thought of Lily's face, of the nights when silence pressed too hard. "Because," he said slowly, "I remember what it felt like when the world kept moving and no one noticed I was falling behind." Ava was quiet for a moment. "I remember that feeling too," she said. They hung up soon after. No promises, no plans, just a shared understanding. That afternoon, Lily came home from school buzzing with excitement. "Daddy, we're supposed to bring someone important to class tomorrow. Like someone we admire." Daniel forced a smile. "That's nice, sweetheart. Can you come?" she asked. Daniel's heart tightened. "I'll try." That evening, as Lily colored at the table, Daniel stared at the unpaid bills. The numbers blurred. Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would, when the timing felt impossible? Right, yes, and tell me their name. Sometimes the smallest kindness becomes the reason we keep going. Across the city, Ava sat alone in her penthouse, the rain streaking down the windows. The note Daniel had written lay on her desk, unfolded now. Worn at the edges, she replayed his voice in her mind, not the words, but the care behind them. For the first time in years, Ava Sterling felt something close to resolve. She picked up her phone and made a call this time. Not to fix a market, but to fix a moment. And by morning, Daniel Brooks would learn that some notes don't just change an evening. They change everything. Daniel barely slept. Not because of fear alone, but because hope, when it arrives uninvited, can be louder than worry. He lay on the couch, listening to Lily's steady breathing from the bedroom, counting it like a promise he didn't want to break. Morning came too fast. Lily was already dressed, backpack on, hair still a little wild. "Don't forget," she said, serious as only 8-year-olds could be. "Important person day." Daniel forced a smile and knelt to zip her bag. "I remember." He walked her to school under a sky that couldn't decide what it wanted to be. At the gate, Lily stopped and looked up at him. "If you can't come," she said, trying to be brave, "it's okay." Daniel swallowed. "I'll try my hardest." After drop-off, he checked his phone again. Nothing from the restaurant. Nothing from corporate. The unpaid suspension sat heavy in his chest. He went home and opened a box he hadn't touched in years, the one he kept on the top shelf. Inside were old documents, a few photographs, and a folded letter with creases so deep they'd become permanent. The letter was from Laura, his wife. She'd written it during her last week in the hospital. The handwriting uneven but determined. "If you're reading this, it means I couldn't stay. Please don't teach Lily to be afraid of loving just because it hurts. And please let someone help you. You don't have to be strong alone." Daniel closed his eyes. He hadn't followed that last part very well. A knock came at the door. Daniel opened it to find Ava standing in the hallway. Raincoat draped neatly over her arm. No security, no entourage. Just her human intent. "I hope this isn't too forward," she said. "But I didn't want to do this over the phone." Daniel stepped aside, stunned. "Of course. Please come in." She glanced around the apartment, small, tidy, lived in. Children's drawings taped to the fridge. A faint smell of coffee and soap. "You live?" "Honestly," Ava said softly, surprising herself. Daniel shrugged. "It's enough." They sat at the small kitchen table. Ava placed her purse beside her chair, posture careful, eyes attentive. "I spoke to your manager," she said. "And to corporate?" Daniel tensed. "I don't want trouble." "You won't get any," Ava replied. "But I need you to hear this clearly. What you did was not inappropriate. It was humane." Daniel exhaled, shoulders dropping just a little. "I lost my job once," Ava continued. "Years ago. Before the money. Before people listened. I didn't lose it because I was bad at it. I lost it because I was grieving, and no one had patience for that." Daniel looked at her, surprised. "I don't tell people that," she added. "They prefer the myth." A quiet settled between them. "Lily has something at school today," Daniel said, almost embarrassed. "She asked me to bring someone important." Ava smiled faintly. "And you didn't think of yourself?" He shook his head. "I never do." Ava stood. "Then let me help you with that." She glanced at the clock. "If you're comfortable, I'd like to come. Not as whatever you think I am. Just as someone who wants to show up." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." At the school, the classroom buzzed with parents, some in suits, some in scrubs, some in uniforms, still smelling faintly of work. Lily spotted Daniel and ran to him, stopping short when she saw Ava double quotes high. Lily said politely. Ava knelt to her level. "Hi, Lily. Your dad told me you're brave." Lily smiled. "He's brave too." During the presentations, children stood and spoke about who mattered to them. One by one, teachers, nurses, grandparents, quiet heroes. When Lily's turn came, she held her paper with both hands. "This is my dad," she said. "He helps people even when he's tired. And this is Ava. She needed help, and my dad didn't walk away." Ava felt her throat tighten. Lily finished simply. "I think helping is important." The room applauded softly, sincerely. "Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would?" "Right, yes. And tell me their name. Maybe gratitude can travel further than we think." After class, a teacher pulled Daniel aside. "She's been doing better," she said. "More confident." Daniel smiled. "She has good examples." Outside, Ava breathed in the crisp air. "Thank you," she said, "for letting me be part of that." Daniel nodded. "Thank you for showing up." His phone buzzed, a message from Paul, the manager. Corporate reviewed the footage. "You're cleared. Come in tomorrow." Paid. Daniel closed his eyes, relief washing over him. Ava watched his face. "Good news?" Yes, he said quietly. Very, she smiled. Then my work here is done? Daniel shook his head. No. You didn't do this to fix things. Ava met his gaze. I did it because kindness shouldn't cost someone their livelihood. They stood there for a moment, neither rushing to leave. Some connections didn't need labels. Some notes didn't need signatures. And as they parted ways under a sky finally clearing, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt since Mara's voice faded from the room. Not closure dot, but continuation dot the next morning. Daniel returned to Le Marais before sunrise. The city was quieter than delivery trucks humming, lights flickering on one by one. He tied his apron slowly, grounding himself in routine. Paid suspension lifted. Job intact. Life still fragile, but breathing. Paul met him near the espresso machine. Corporate asked about you again, he said, watching Daniel carefully. Daniel's stomach tightened. Is something wrong? Paul shook his head. No, just curiosity. Apparently, Ms. Sterling doesn't take interest in restaurants she dines at. Daniel nodded, unsure what to say. The shift passed without incident. No whispers. No phones pointed at him. Just orders, plates, polite smiles. Normal. That afternoon, Daniel picked Lily up from school. She skipped beside him, chattering about art class and spelling tests. At home, she spread crayons across the table. Daddy, she said casually, are you rich? Daniel laughed softly. No, sweetheart. Then why do people act weird when they talk about that lady? She asked. Daniel paused. Because some people forget everyone has feelings, especially when money's involved. Lily thought for a moment. I won't forget. He smiled. I know. Across the city, Ava sat in a glass-walled boardroom, surrounded by executives who spoke in careful tones. The restaurant footage had reached her too, but not in the way they expected. It's going viral, one advisor said. People are calling it inspiring. Ava leaned back, fingers resting on the table. Then let it be that. Another executive frowned. But associating with staff is human, Ava cut in calmly. And humanity isn't a liability. Silence followed. Not defiant, respectful. That evening, Ava drove herself to Le Marais. No reservation. No announcement. Daniel was wiping a counter when he saw her. His first instinct was worry. She raised a hand slightly. I'm not here as a guest. Daniel hesitated. Then as what? As someone who wants to do better, Ava said. And maybe invite you to help me. They sat at a quiet corner table after closing. Coffee steamed between them. I run a foundation, Ava said. Large, well-funded, but disconnected. We make decisions from the top and call it impact. Daniel listened. I want someone who understands the ground, she continued. Someone who's lived the consequences of being overlooked. Daniel shook his head gently. I'm just a waiter. Ava met his eyes. No, you're someone who saw me when I was invisible. That's leadership. Daniel swallowed. What are you asking? Not a job, Ava said. An advisory role, part-time, paid, flexible, no press. Daniel thought of Lily, of the bills, of Murr's letter. Let someone help you. I'd need time, he said. Ava nodded. Take all you need. If you've done one small good thing recently, held a door, listened without fixing, showed up when it was inconvenient, share it below. Write it not to boast, but to remind others that kindness is still alive. Your story might be the reason someone keeps going tonight. Days passed. Then weeks. Daniel began attending meetings, not in suits, but in the same clothes he wore to work. He asked questions others didn't think to ask. Who benefits? Who gets left out? What happens after the funding ends? People listened. At home, Lily noticed the change, not money, but energy. Her dad laughed more, slept better. He still packed lunches and walked her to school. One night, she asked, "Do you miss Mom?" Daniel nodded. "Every day. But you're not sad all the time now," Lily said. Daniel smiled softly. "No, I think she'd like that." The foundation launched a pilot program staffed by people who'd once needed help themselves. Not charity. Partnership. At the opening event, Ava stood at the podium. "This program exists because someone reminded me that power doesn't always speak loudly. Sometimes it whispers." She glanced at Daniel. Just once, applause followed, not roaring, but steady. Later, alone on the balcony, Ava spoke quietly. "You changed something in me." Daniel shook his head. "You chose to listen?" She smiled. "That's rarer than money." As the city lights flickered on below them, Daniel felt something subtle, not certainty, not triumph, but alignment. He hadn't missed his chance by helping a stranger. He'd found it. The first article appeared quietly. No headlines. No drama. Just a human interest piece buried beneath market updates and restaurant reviews. A billionaire and a waiter. A note. A pause. A different way forward. Daniel didn't see it until Paul showed him during a slow afternoon shift. "People are asking if it's you," Paul said, half smiling. "I told them it's none of their business." Daniel stared at the screen. His name wasn't mentioned. Lily's wasn't either. That mattered more than anything. "What do you think?" Paul asked. Daniel thought for a moment. "I think it's not the story they should be watching." Paul raised an eyebrow. "They should be watching what happens next," Daniel said. At the foundation, things began to move faster than Daniel expected. Emails, meetings, requests for input. People who had never waited for permission suddenly wanted it, and then came the reveal. Ava hadn't planned. During a quarterly meeting, one of the senior board members leaned forward and said, "We've reviewed the numbers. The pilot program is outperforming projections." Ava nodded. "That's because it's run by people who understand the cost of being ignored." The man hesitated. "There's something else. Public interest has spiked. People want to know why this program feels different." Ava glanced at Daniel. He didn't speak. She turned back to the board. "Because it started with listening." Someone asked, "Listening to whom?" Ava didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "To a single father who reminded me I wasn't alone." The room went quiet. That was the moment. Not loud, not cinematic, but final. If that moment hit you, if you felt something shift inside, leave a... Sometimes one small symbol says what our hearts can't. After that, the questions changed. Not how much will this cost, but who does this help? Not how do we control the narrative, but how do we protect the people inside it? Daniel found himself speaking more, not because he wanted to, but because silence no longer felt safe. At home, Lily watched him prepare for a meeting one evening, carefully folding papers into his bag. "You look nervous," she said. Daniel smiled. "A little. Is it like the restaurant?" she asked. "When you gave that lady the note?" Daniel paused. "Sort of. Then you'll be okay," Lily said simply. "You were brave then." Daniel swallowed. "So were you." The next morning, Ava invited Daniel to her office, not the boardroom, but a smaller space overlooking the river. Sunlight spilled across the floor. No glass walls. No audience. "I need to ask you something," Ava said. Daniel nodded. "Okay. Do you ever feel guilty?" she asked carefully, "that things are getting easier?" Daniel thought of Mara, of hospital bills, of nights that felt endless. "Yes," he said honestly. "Sometimes," Ava nodded. "Me too. But I've learned something." "What's that?" "That guilt can either freeze you or fuel you." Daniel considered that. "Which do you choose?" Ava smiled faintly. "I'm learning to choose fuel." That afternoon, The foundation announced the expansion of the pilot program nationwide, with safeguards. With voices like Daniel's built into its structure, the press wanted interviews. Ava declined most of them. Daniel declined all. "This story isn't about us," he said when asked. "It's about what happens when we stop assuming who matters." At school, Lily's teacher pulled him aside. "She read about you," she said, handing him a paper. It read, "My dad listens. He helps people even when he's tired." "I want to be like that." Daniel folded the paper carefully and put it in his wallet. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Daniel sat on the couch and reread Mara's letter. "Let someone help you." He smiled softly. "I did," he whispered. "And I'm still here." Outside, the city hummed, unaware of how many lives had shifted quietly beneath its noise. Ava stood on her balcony across town, the note still tucked into her desk drawer. She hadn't framed it, hadn't shared it. Some things didn't need witnesses, they just needed to be honored. And as the night settled in, both of them understood the same truth. Change didn't always arrive with power. Sometimes it arrived with a whisper and stayed because someone chose to listen. The backlash came quietly, not from the public. Most people were still calling the story refreshing, human, rare. It came from places Daniel had never been invited into before. Boardrooms behind closed doors, emails marked confidential, conversations where names were replaced with phrases like risk exposure and precedent. Ava felt it first. She stood at the window of her office as the city stretched endlessly below, her phone pressed to her ear. The voice on the other end was calm, practiced. "You're changing the tone of the foundation," the man said. "Some donors are uncomfortable." Ava didn't turn around. "With listening? With elevating people who aren't?" He paused. "Qualified." Ava closed her eyes. "Define qualified." Silence. "That's what I thought," she said, and ended the call. Later that day, Daniel received an email requesting his presence at a review meeting. No explanation, no agenda. He stared at the screen for a long time. At dinner, Lily noticed. "Bad news?" she asked, pushing peas around her plate. "Maybe," Daniel said honestly. She nodded, as if filing it away. "Do you want my lucky pencil?" He smiled. "Always." The review meeting took place in a room Daniel had never entered before. Long table, muted colors, faces that didn't soften when he spoke. Ava sat at one end, composed but alert. A man across from Daniel leaned forward. "Mr. Brooks," he said, "do you believe your personal experience makes you fit to advise policy?" Daniel met his gaze. "No," he said calmly. "I believe it makes me responsible." A murmur moved through the room. Another voice followed. "Some feel this initiative is driven more by emotion than strategy." Daniel nodded. "Emotion shows us where pain is. Strategy decides whether we walk past it." Ava watched him closely. Then came the question no one wanted to ask out loud. "Do you think Miss Sterling's involvement with you has compromised her judgment?" The room went still. Daniel inhaled slowly. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing in, the cost of speaking honestly, the temptation to stay quiet. He looked at Ava, then back at the room. "No," he said. "I think it clarified it." Ava's fingers curled slightly against the table. After the meeting, Ava caught up with Daniel in the hallway. "You didn't have to defend me," she said quietly. Daniel shook his head. "I wasn't defending you. I was defending the work." She studied him. "Some people won't forgive this shift. They'll fight it." Daniel nodded. "Change always costs someone comfort." That night, Daniel received a message from an unknown number. "You embarrass people who didn't deserve it." "Know your place?" Daniel stared at the words, his chest tightening. A second message followed. "This doesn't end well for people like you." He didn't reply. Instead, He sat on the edge of Lily's bed long after she fell asleep, watching her breathe, wondering how fragile peace really was. The next morning, Ava called him early. "I need to tell you something before you hear it elsewhere," she said. Daniel braced himself. "Okay, several donors are threatening to pull out," Ava continued. "They want distance. From me. From you." Daniel exhaled. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," Ava said firmly. "This is the cost of integrity." There was a pause. "Daniel," she added, quieter now, "if this becomes too much, I'll understand if you step back." Daniel thought of Mara's voice, of Lily's pencil tucked into his bag, of the note that started everything. "I won't walk away," he said, "but I won't fight with anger either." Ava smiled faintly. "Good, because anger is what they expect." That afternoon, a former board member requested a private meeting with Daniel. Reluctantly, Daniel agreed. The man was older, tired-looking, his confidence worn thin. "I didn't like what you said," the man admitted. "It made me feel small." Daniel nodded. "That wasn't my intention." "I know," the man said, "but it made me remember someone I failed." Silence stretched between them. "I'm not asking you to apologize," the man said. "I'm asking how you kept your kindness." Daniel thought for a moment. "I didn't," he said. "Not always. I just kept choosing it again." The man swallowed. "I don't know if I could forgive myself." Daniel met his eyes. "Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's deciding to do better while you still can." The man left without another word. Later, as Daniel walked home, the sky darkened with heavy clouds. The city felt tense, waiting to be honest if you were hurt, ignored, or threatened for doing the right thing. Could you forgive? Type "forgive" if you could, or "never" if it would break you too deeply. That evening, Ava stood before the foundation's full board. "I won't reverse course," she said calmly. "If donors leave, they leave. But this work continues." Someone asked, "Even if it costs you everything?" Ava didn't hesitate, especially then. As the meeting adjourned, Ava felt the weight of what was coming across town. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, Lily's lucky pencil between his fingers, wondering if doing the right thing would finally ask for more than he could give. And somewhere between power and principle, the story leaned toward its breaking point where forgiveness would be tested, and courage would need to speak louder than fear. The fallout arrived like a slow tide, not a crash, not a spectacle, just a steady withdrawal of comfort that exposed what had always been fragile beneath the surface. 3 donors pulled out within a week. 2 more followed quietly. Headlines shifted from inspiring to controversial. Comment sections filled with opinions from people who had never stood where Daniel had stood, or where. Ava now stood at the foundation, desks emptied. Not fired, reassigned, relocated, distanced. The building felt wider somehow, colder. Daniel noticed it most in the pauses. Meetings that used to start on time now lingered. Emails took longer to return. Some smiles didn't reach the eyes anymore. One afternoon, Daniel found Ava alone in the conference room, lights off, city gray behind her. "You should go home," he said gently. Ava didn't turn. "I can't remember the last time someone told me that without an agenda." Daniel smiled faintly. "Then consider this a reminder. You're allowed to rest." She finally looked at him. "Do you regret this?" He shook his head without hesitation. "No." Ava studied his face. "Even now?" "Especially now," Daniel said. "Because now we know it's real." That evening, Lily sensed the weight he carried. She sat beside him on the couch, legs tucked under her, coloring quietly. After a while, she asked, "Are you scared?" Daniel considered lying, then didn't, a little. She nodded, thoughtful. "I get scared before spelling tests." Daniel smiled. "And what do you do?" I remember you cheering, she said. Even if I mess up. Daniel's chest tightened. That's good advice. The next morning, Ava called an emergency staff meeting. People gathered cautiously, unsure what version of leadership they'd be asked to believe in. Ava stood at the front. No notes in hand. I won't pretend this is easy, she said. We're losing money. We're losing approval. But we're not losing purpose. She paused, letting the room breathe. If you're here because this was safe, I understand if you leave, she continued. But if you're here because you believe listening matters, then stay. We'll build slower, but we'll build honestly. No applause followed, instead something better. People stayed seated. That afternoon, messages began arriving not from donors, but from recipients, single parents, former students, staff who'd once been overlooked. One email read, I didn't know foundations could feel like this. Another, this is the first time I wasn't treated like a statistic. Daniel read them quietly. One by one. Later that night, he stood on the balcony outside Ava's office. The city lit up like 1,000 lives in motion. You okay? Ava asked, joining him. Daniel nodded. I think so. She hesitated. If this fails, it won't, Daniel said. Ava smiled faintly. You're very sure? No, he corrected gently. And hopeful. There was a difference. A week later, something unexpected happened. A mid-sized donor, one Ava hadn't even remembered, made a public pledge. Not massive, not flashy, but deliberate. In support of integrity-driven leadership, the statement read, We're investing where our listening leads. Others followed. Not many. Enough. The narrative shifted. Again, not dramatically, but decisively. The foundation stabilized. Not as it was, but as it needed to be. At school. Willie stood in front of her class again. This is my dad, she said proudly. He helps people even when it's hard. And sometimes people don't like that. But he keeps going. Daniel felt Ava's hand rest lightly on his shoulder. Outside the classroom, a parent approached him. My brother's been struggling, she said quietly. Do you think someone like him would be heard? Daniel met her eyes. Yes, he said, if we make room. That night, Daniel tucked Lily into bed. Daddy? She asked sleepily. Yeah? If being good makes life harder, is it still worth it? Daniel leaned down, brushing her hair back. Yes, he said softly, because being good isn't about what it gives you. It's about what it doesn't take away. She nodded, already drifting. Across town, Ava sat alone at her desk, the original note unfolded once more. She traced the words lightly, then placed it back in the drawer. For the first time in years, she felt a line, not powerful, not admired. Just right. If you believe love still wins, even when it's quiet, even when it costs comment. Amen. Let's fill this moment with hope. Someone scrolling right now might need to see it. As the city slept, Daniel and Ava stood on opposite sides of the same truth. That hope doesn't arrive all at once. It builds person by person, choice by choice, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do. To stay. The noise faded slowly, not all at once. Not cleanly. Just enough that what mattered could finally be heard again. Months passed. The foundation no longer chased growth for headlines. It chose depth. Smaller rooms, longer conversations, fewer promises kept carefully. Daniel no longer introduced himself by his job. He didn't need to. He was present. That was enough. One afternoon, as spring softened the city, Ava and Daniel sat in the same quiet corner of Limerave, restaurant where everything had begun. Not as billionaire and waiter, not as symbols. Just two people sharing soup. I used to think silence was power, Ava said, watching steam rise from her bowl. That if I didn't speak, I couldn't be challenged. Daniel smiled gently. Silence can protect, or it can disappear people. She nodded. You didn't disappear me. Daniel didn't answer right away. You let yourself be seen. Across town, Lily stood on a small stage at school, reading from a piece of paper she'd folded too many times. It's about my dad, she said shyly. He helped someone even when it scared him. And now I want to help people too. Parents wiped their eyes. Teachers smiled. Daniel arrived just in time to hear the applause. Afterward, Lily ran into his arms. Did I do okay? You did more than okay, he said. You told the truth. That night, Daniel found Ava on the rooftop of her building, city lights shimmering like distant stars. I got offered a board position today, Ava said quietly. A different foundation, bigger, safer. Daniel raised an eyebrow. And I said no, she replied. Because they didn't want listening. They wanted optics. Daniel nodded. That sounds like you. She smiled. That sounds like us. They stood in silence, comfortable now. Ava turned to him. Do you ever think about the note? What would have happened if you hadn't written it? Daniel thought of Mara's letter, of Lily's pencil, of every moment that could have gone another way. Sometimes, he said. But I don't think the note was the point. What was? Ava asked. That I stayed, Daniel replied. That I didn't look away. Ava exhaled slowly. Neither did I. If the story moved you, if you felt the weight of quiet courage, the power of one kind choice, don't scroll past silently. Tap like not for a channel or story, but for every soul who carried pain and still chose compassion. One click can be your way of saying, I felt this. I see you. Later that night, Daniel tucked Lily into bed. She yawned, half asleep. Daddy, she murmured, do you think notes can change the world? Daniel kissed her forehead. I think people can. Notes just remind them. Outside. The city breath, busy, imperfect, alive. Somewhere in a drawer, a folded piece of paper rested, its edges worn not from fame, but from meaning. And somewhere between wealth and weariness, between loss and love, two lives had shifted not because of power, but because someone was